Hello students, today we are going to do lesson 4 of class 11 from Snapshots book titled Albert Einstein at School by Patrick Pringle. We all know Albert Einstein, the father of modern physics, is famous to have discovered the theory of relativity which marked a revolution in physics. However, how many of us know the fact that in his early school days he was a dull student and got expelled from his school? No teacher liked him, and he too, in turn, disliked attending school. He believed in education, but did not consider learning facts as education. He hated school because he hated the conventional form of education, and this led to the school finally taking a decision in chasing him away. This chapter is an extract from the biography of Albert Einstein named The Young Einstein by Patrick Pringle. In this lesson, Patrick familiarizes the reader with those years in Einstein's life where he was struggling each day in school, and as each day passed, the school diploma felt like a far fetched dream. It throws light upon a few encounters with his teacher, what he felt about the neighborhood he lived in, and how he had only one good friend, Yuri. The way Albert strategizes to get out of the miserable place that is school and how things turn around in the end makes the story even more interesting. Now, let us begin with the reading of the lesson. Albert Einstein is regarded as the greatest physicist since Newton. In the following extract from the young Einstein, the well known biographer means a person who writes an account of someone else. Biographer Patrick Pringle describes the circumstances which led to Albert Einstein's expulsion from a German school. So, Einstein was studying in a German school and he was expelled from there. Expulsion means the action of forcing someone to leave an organization. Here it is school. So, this lesson is about the famous theoretical physicist Albert Einstein, and it is taken from the biography named Young Einstein, written by Patrick Pringle. The lesson talks about how Albert Einstein hated school and wanted to leave it and then was forced out of it. Now, the lesson it begins with an account of Albert with his history teacher. The class was going on where history teacher asked him about the year in which the Prussians defeated the French at Waterloo. So, how he asked, in what year, Einstein, asked the history teacher, did the Prussians defeat the French at Waterloo? I don't know, sir. Why don't you know? You have been told it often enough. So, when teacher asked him in which year the Prussians defeated the French at Waterloo, as usual, Einstein does not remember it, to which Mr. Braun points out that the reason for this is because Einstein never bothers to learn them. So when he was told, when teacher told him that you have been told number of times, then why you are not knowing it? He says that I must have forgotten. Did you ever try to learn? Asked Mr. Braun. No, sir, Albert replied with his usual unthinking honesty. Why not? To this, Einstein answered that I can't see any point in learning dates. One can always look them up in a book. So when Mr. Braun points out that the reason for this is because Einstein never bothers to learn them, Albert justifies that he finds it pointless to digest dates, to learn dates, because one can always look them up in books whenever needed. Mr. Braun was speechless for a few moments. So, the answer of Einstein left Mr. Braun dumbstruck for a while, shocked for a while. You amaze me, Einstein, he said at last. Don't you realize that one can always look most things up in books? That applies to all the facts that you learn at school. Yes, sir. Then I suppose you don't see any point in learning facts. Frankly, sir, I don't, said Albert. So, as Mr. Braun was left dumbstruck by the answer of Einstein, and Mr. Braun said that most of the things that are being taught in school can be looked up in the books and there is no point in mugging up facts. Einstein, without realizing that the statement was sarcastic, agrees with him. Further, Mr. Braun says, then you don't believe in education at all. Professor, he concludes that if Einstein doesn't see any point in grasping facts, then he should not also be a believer and follower of education. To this, Einstein answered, oh, yes, sir, I do, means I do believe in education, but I don't think learning facts is education. So Albert clearly replies that he is undoubtedly vested in the idea of education, but according to him, merely digesting facts is not education. In that case, said the history teacher with heavy sarcasm, means he passed on a bitter remark. Perhaps you will be so kind as to tell the class the Einstein theory of education. So the history teacher, then in an attempt to make fun of him in front of the whole class, asked him to elaborate his version of ideal education. To which Albert flushed. Flushed means he became red with embarrassment. I think it's not facts that matter, but ideas, he said. I don't see the point in learning the dates of battles or even which of the armies killed more men. I would be more interested in learning why those soldiers were trying to kill each other. So, again, being very clear about his idea of education, Albert explains that it is useless to acquire knowledge on dates of battles and number of men that were compromised. What is important is to read and analyze the reasons that were responsible for the battle between the two armies. That's enough. Mr. Braun's eyes were cold and cruel. We don't want a lecture from you, Einstein. You will stay in for an extra period today, although I don't imagine it will do you much good. It won't do the school any good either. You are a disgrace, means you are an insult. I don't know why you continue to come. So, Mr. Braun, he got extremely angry and interrupted Albert's speech and punished him to stay for extra classes, even if it were of no good to anyone, including Albert. The teacher then calls him a disgrace, expressing his displeasure of having him around. Albert mentions that he doesn't want to be there either. When he says that it's not my wish, sir, Albert pointed out. So it shows that even he didn't want to be there in the school. Then you are an ungrateful boy and ought to be ashamed of yourself. I suggest you ask your father to take you away. So teacher then remarkably calls him an ungrateful boy who should be ashamed and suggests that his father should take him away from school. Why he's ungrateful boy? Because his parents, they are trying hard to get him educated in the school, spending money, though they are not financially stable. But here this boy, he is not taking interest in studies, so that is why he says that you are an ungrateful boy, you are not thankful to your parents, and you should be ashamed of yourself the way you behave. And if you're not interested, then you ask your father to take you away from school. Albert felt miserable when he left school that afternoon. Not that it had been a bad day. Most days were bad now anyway, but because he had to go back to the hateful place the next morning. So that afternoon, Albert was unhappy when he left school. It was not that the day was bad, but in general, days were getting bad at school, and he hated the thought of going to school every morning. He only wished his father would take him away, but there was no point in even asking. He knew what the answer would be. He would have to stay until he had taken his diploma. So his only wish was that his father would take him to Italy, where his family was residing, along with him. But it was pointless to ask his father because he would anyway make him stay there until he completed his diploma or he completed his education. Now, going back to his lodgings, lodging is a temporary accommodation or a room rented out to someone, usually in the same residence as the owner. As you have been seeing this practice in your locality, that the owner, suppose it's a multi-storied building, and owner is also living in the on one floor, and then the tenant is on the other floor. So that is lodgings. So going back to his lodgings did not cheer him up, did not make him happy. His father had so little money to spare that Albert had been found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. Munich is a city in Germany. He did not mind the bad food and lack of comfort or even the dirt and squalor. Squalor is state of being extremely dirty and unpleasant, especially as a result of poverty and neglect. But he hated the atmosphere of slum violence. This paragraph is important, and why he hated his lodgings. So, answer is given in this paragraph. Please mark it. His landlady beat her children regularly, and every Saturday her husband came drunk and beat her. So, school was surely an unpleasant place for Einstein, but his place of stay in Munich was nothing better. Because of limited cash availability with his father, he had to stay within the poorest neighborhood in Munich. However, poverty, bad food, dirt, and lack of comfort hardly bothered him. It was the frequent fights at the place that he hated. Even the landlady's family was a violent one, where she used to hit her kids every now and then, while her husband beat her every Saturday after he came back home drunk. So that is why he did not like going back to his lodgings, because of the atmosphere of slum violence. But at least you have a room of your own, which is more than I can say, said Yuri. So now here we are introduced to his friend Yuri, who is also not very fortunate. And he reminds Albert that he should be glad about the fact that he has a room of his own to live, even though the neighborhood is not something he likes. So he says that you have a room of your own. When Yuri, he said to Yuri said when he called around in the evening, means when he visited Einstein in the evening. At that time, he said that you should be happy that you have a room of your own. At least you live among civilized human beings, even if they are all poor students, said Albert. So, in return, Albert reminds Yuri that even though Yuri lives among poor students, they are all civilized and non violent. Civilized means they are cultured, polite, well mannered. So, at least those people, they are well mannered, they are non violent. He finds that Yuri is living in a very good place. They are not all civilized, Yuri replied. Did you not hear that one of them was killed last week in a duel? Duel is a contest with deadly weapons arranged between two people in order to settle a point of honor. You can say that it is a fight between two persons. So he says that, did you not hear that one of them was killed last week in a duel? And what happens to the one who killed him? Nothing, of course. He is even proud of it. His only worry is that the authorities have told him not to fight any more duels, and he's upset about this because he hasn't a single scar on his face to wear for the rest of his life as a badge of honor. So when Albert reminded Yuri that he lived among poor students and they are all civilized and non-violent. Yuri interrupted to correct him that not all of them have manners and only last week one was killed in a fight. And the one who killed him did not face any circumstances except never being allowed to play a duel again. And the only regret that guy had was that he won't be able to show off a scar. Scar means injury mark, as a symbol of bravery, as a badge of honor, as a sign of honor. Albert, uh, oh, exclaimed Albert, and these are the students? Well, you will be a student one day, said Yuri. I doubt it, said Albert gloomily. So, when Yuri told about that duel and how the person who killed the other one uh, was uh, was having only one regret, that he won't be able to show off a scar as a symbol of bravery because he did not get it on his face. Albert sighs at the state of students pursuing diplomas. Yuri then gives Albert some hope by saying that he will be a student too, to which Albert expresses his doubtfulness. He said gloomily means he was not happy because he had a doubt that whether he will be able to pass school diploma or not. To this, he says that I don't think I'll ever pass the exams for the school diploma. He told his cousin Elsa the same next time she came to Munich. So, when Yuri said that one day you will also be a student, and Einstein expressed his doubt, saying that he doesn't know whether he will be able to pass exam for the school diploma or not, and he told the same thing to his cousin Elsa the next time when she came to Munich. Normally, she lived in Berlin where her father had a business. I'm sure you could learn enough to pass the exams, Albert, if you tried, she said. So, Elsa, who had come to visit Einstein in Munich, who normally lived in Berlin, the place of her family business, she tried to convince Albert to learn just enough to pass the exam. So, she says that if you try to learn, you can learn enough to pass the exams. And she says that she knows a lot of boys who are much more stupid than Einstein, but still they get through. They get through means they clear exams, they pass. So she knows that there are other boys also who are more stupid than him. They are dull guys, they are dull boys, but still they are able to get through. And she says that they say you don't have to know anything, you don't have to understand what you are taught, just be able to repeat it in the exams. That's the whole trouble, said Albert. I'm no good at learning things by heart. So, Elsa, she tried to convince Albert to learn just enough to pass the exams by learning and repeating facts, and that she had seen a lot of stupid guys doing like that. Albert again exclaimed that learning things by heart is not his best uh, sweet, or you can say it is not his quality. He is not good at learning things perfectly or remembering things perfectly, or you can say cramming. He is not good at cramming like a parrot, like we seen many of the children doing it. You don't need to be good at it. Anyone can learn like a parrot. You just don't try. So Elsa, she presented her counter agreement that anyone can learn like a parrot, but for that one needs to try, which Albert doesn't. And yet I always see you with a book under your arm, added Elsa. Then she expresses irony by mentioning that he always has a book under his arm when he is not interested in studies, when he doesn't have the caliber of cramming things. Still, she finds him carrying a book under his arm. So she asks him, what is the one you are reading? He says, a book on geology. Geology is science of the Earth, or you can say study of Earth. Geology, rocks and things. Do you learn that? No, we have hardly any science at school. So, when he said that it is a book on geology which is not taught in school, and he adds that they are hardly taught science at school, then why are you studying it? Elsa doesn't understand why he is reading the book if it is not a part of his curriculum. Einstein gave an answer, because I like it. Isn't that a good enough reason? Elsa sighed. You are right, of course, Albert, she said, but it won't help with your diploma. So, Albert clarifies that he likes studying science and considers it a reason good enough to read it. Elsa understands this but also warns him that it is not going to help him in passing his diploma. So here we come to know that Einstein has interest in science. In what other areas he has interest, that we will come to know in this paragraph. Apart from books on science, his only comfort was music, and he played his violin regularly until his landlady asked him to stop. That wailing gets on my nerves, she said. There's enough noise in this house with all the kids howling. Albert was tempted to point out that most of the time it was she who made them howl, but he decided it was better to say nothing. Wailing means crying with pain or anger, howling, making a howling sound, or you can say shouting. So, Albert was very fond of reading science books, and the only other thing that brought him joy and peace was music. He played the violin a lot, but only until his landlady told him to stop. The sound supposedly irritated her, and she justified by saying that kids already make a lot of noise in the house. Albert wanted to say that she is the one who made her kids cry all the time, but somehow resisted the urge to say it, probably for the better. Probably for the better means obviously he was a tenant, and if he said such kind of thing, then he would have been thrown out of the house. So he thought that it is better to keep quiet. Now, what he says here, I must get away from here, he told Yuri after 6 months alone in Munich. It is absurd, it is unreasonable, it is inappropriate that I should go on like this. In the end, it will turn out I have been wasting my father's money and everyone's time. It will be better for all if I stop now. And then what will you do? Yuri asked. So, after being in Munich alone for 6 months, Albert expressed to Yuri that he feels it's high time he moves away from there. He sees no point in carrying on like this, because if he does, it is only going to result in wastage of his father's money, everyone's time, and efforts. So, Yuri asked if he has any backup plans. So, to which Albert says that I don't know. If I go to Milan, I'm afraid my father will send me back. So, when he was asked about his backup plans, Albert says that going to Milan wouldn't be such a great idea because his father would send him back. Uh, as they were discussing, uh, an great idea struck to his mind when he said, no, that my father will send me back. Unless an idea came to his mind, his eyes gleamed with a sudden idea. And it occurred to him all of a sudden. And then he asked his friend, do you know any friendly doctors? I know a lot of medical students and some of them are friendly, said Yuri. Doctor, no, I have never had enough money to go to one. Why? So, when idea came to Einstein's mind, he asked Yuri if he knew any doctors. Unfortunately, Yuri could never afford to go to one, but he did have a lot of friends from the medical field. Means he said that he knew number of medical students, but Due to lack of money, he was never able to visit any doctor, so he doesn't know any doctor personally. Suppose, said Albert, that I had a nervous breakdown. Suppose a doctor would say, it's bad for me to go to school and I need to get right away from air. So, what was Albert's idea? His idea included a nervous breakdown and a doctor that could advise him that school is bad for him and he needs to stay as far as he could from it. So, you see what idea struck to his mind and what he planned to do. Now, we in the next part we will see whether his idea worked, whether doctor considered that he had a nervous breakdown and he should be kept away from school. That we will find out in the next video. Thank you.